All right, everybody, it's that time again. It's time for Fins Nation. I am your host, Louis Sung, and today what we're going to be talking about here, there seems to be a lot of discourse lately regarding who deserves the MVP the most. Some people are saying all of a sudden, I don't know where this came from, Dak Prescott. Okay, I get it. He's a Dallas Cowboy, and lately he's been on fire, and so I guess just because of that, he deserves the MVP reward all of a sudden. Okay, whatever. You can go ahead and say that if you want. But most of the discourse, and this is amongst Dolphins fans of what I've noticed, is that there are a lot of people discussing about whether it's Tua Tagovailoa that should be getting the MVP award, or should it be his wide receiver, Tyreek Hill, who is also doing many things that are quite unprecedented at this point. Now, I have my own personal take on who exactly I think is the most deserving on the Miami Dolphins, and I'm going to get into all the reasons why and break down some things that maybe some of you already know. Maybe there are some of you who don't know this, but I'm going to go ahead and let everybody know why I personally feel like the person I'm going to show you guys deserves the MVP award. But before that, really quick, just want to go ahead and mention, as always, this show is brought to you by our good friends over at PrizePicks.com. PrizePicks.com is the revolutionary fantasy platform where you can now pick up to 6 different players across professional sports leagues, whether that is the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, one of each. It's up to you to decide. Just choose whether your chosen player will get more or less than their projected stat. They give you free squares, special Taco Tuesday promos, Flex Friday specials where you can get your money back if you lose, or multiply the amount of money you can normally win. So with offers like that, it's hard to justify not signing up if you are any kind of a fantasy sports fan. So use the promo code 5, that's FIVE, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit when you sign up. Again, that's promo code 5, FIVE. Go to prizepicks.com, deposit your $100, and let PrizePicks give you $100 of their dollars for you to play with, and get started winning today. And this show is also affiliate sponsored by My Nintendo Store. So we're all gamers at heart, I believe, and Nintendo's been there for us for nearly 50 years, creating all-time classics that are remembered by every generation growing up. Right now, they have special deals going on for some of what are already some of their most top-selling games in their lineup. Super Mario RPG, a classic from the days of the Nintendo 64, has been completely remastered from the ground up, and as of November 17th, it is now available for everybody to purchase and to be able to enjoy Mario's first ever RPG adventure for the first time all over again. And out right now is also Super Mario Bros. Wonder, the Mario Bros. Latest completely new game that is already receiving rave reviews from both critics and actual gamers alike. Just click the links in the description below this video to order either of these awesome titles, and by doing so, you will also be receiving bonus items upon making your purchase. So go ahead, again, click on the links in the description below when you make your order. My Nintendo Store, your best and quickest gateway to the world of Nintendo. So I'm going to go ahead and break it all down for everybody right now. A lot of the arguments being made in favor of Tyreek Hill are basically saying about how Tyreek is on the pace to get the first ever 2,000-yard season, which, of course, is incredible. The argument being made is that in many ways the offense is built around what Tyreek Hill does, the influence that he has on certain players, the influence that he has on defenses, the influence that he has on defensive coordinators, and how they're actually going to try to defend this juggernaut that is the Miami Dolphins offense when it's firing on all cylinders. And all of those things are valid. Those are very valid points. But here is where I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to veer off that path. And you can already tell where this is going. My choice, if I had to pick a Dolphin who deserves the MVP award more than anybody, it is going to be Tua Tagovailoa. I'm sorry. And there are several different reasons why. There are all these players, all these analysts, everybody who are coming out and saying that what Tua is doing is nothing special. That it's because of Tyreek Hill. The only reason that Tua is successful is because of Tyreek Hill. Now, if you have listened to this show for any extent of time over the past several months, you already know how I feel about those types of narratives. You know that I think they are bogus, that they are uneducated. But then there are people like, for instance, just recently, Dallas Cowboys linebacker Micah Parsons. He went on his podcast and basically said that he could be the quarterback for Tyreek Hill and he would be successful. So somehow he managed to take this compliment towards Tyreek, talking about how incredible Tyreek Hill is, and he basically turned it into an insult on Tua. See, that's the problem that I have with all these people who are coming out and talking about why Tyreek deserves the MVP. Because it doesn't feel like they are capable of saying that this is why I feel like Tyreek deserves it, and they can't get away from knocking down Tua Tagovailoa as a result. Every single person, they try. Most analysts will at least try to pretend like they're trying to not knock Tua. Like they'll say, well, it's no disrespect to Tua, this isn't a knock on Tua or anything like that, or some different way of wording the same thing. But they will always say that what Tyreek Hill is doing, nothing against Tua, but this is what Tyreek Hill is doing, and it is something that makes the entire offense work on a different level that it would not work without him. I am not going to deny that. I'm not, because they're right about that. If Tyreek Hill were not on this football team, it would not be nearly as effective as it is right now. That is true. But this is where we have to go ahead and veer off. Because all these things that they're saying, they can be true, but that is not a way to take away what Tua has done. Going to go ahead and read some numbers to you guys, so I'm not just going to rant about it without any kind of way to back it up. Let me go ahead and give you guys some interesting little metrics here that I was able to find. So, just for instance, just going to go ahead and pull this up. This comes from Twitter at Waddlehouse17, who actually compiled all this stuff. Feel free to do your own research to look it up for yourself. But as of December 5th, which is when I am recording this, Tua's stats with Tyreek Hill while he is off the field. Tyreek Hill is not on the field with these numbers, okay? Because everybody's talking about all Tua has to do is just take a shot to Tyreek, and he's the one who does all the work. Not true. He's saying that if Tyreek Hill is not on the field, Tua looks pedestrian. He looks average. Some people even say that he looks bad. And I don't know where they're getting this from. I don't know if this is just their way of trying to justify and try to fool people into thinking that it's all Tyreek Hill. But these are the numbers for Tua when Tyreek Hill is not on the football field, whether he's going and taking an IV break, whether he got his ankle rolled up on and he has to hobble off the field for 2 seconds and then he comes back in like he never got hurt in the first place. Tyreek Hill's amazing. But these are Tua's numbers without Tyreek Hill. He is 63 of 76 for 82.9 completion percentage. He has thrown for 639 yards, averaging 8.4 yards per attempt. He has 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and a passer rating, that passer rating number that everybody loves so much, 119.2 passer rating without Tyreek Hill on the field. That's without him. And now let's go a little bit more. This is just for 2023. Now, even back in 2022, when the offense really started to take off, when Mike McDaniel began coaching the Dolphins in 2022, this tweet comes from C.K. Parrott, Chris Kaufman of the 3 Yards Per Carry podcast. You all should go check that out on OnlyFins as well. Only $3 a month. Best $3 you ever spend, I promise. Since Mike McDaniel began coaching the Dolphins in 2022, Tua Tagovailoa has thrown 131 passes with Tyreek Hill not being on the football field. So now these numbers encapsulate all 2 seasons so far that Tyreek has been here. Tua, without Tyreek, is 102 of 131 for 1,092 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, and 114.2 passer rating. And again, I reiterate, that is without Tyreek Hill on the football field. Sometimes Jalen Waddle is also not on the football field. Sometimes it's just Cedric Wilson or River Craycraft. Last season it would have been Trent Sherfield. Maybe he had to throw to a running back like a Raheem Mostert or a Jeff Wilson. Maybe sometime before Chase Edmonds left, maybe he threw the ball to him a couple of times. All that stuff is in there. So where do you get off telling me that somehow Tyreek Hill is responsible for all of Tua's success? It doesn't make any sense on a statistical standpoint, nor does it make any sense in what you are watching on the film. Whenever Tyreek Hill has had to leave, all he has to do is just pivot to somebody else. Jalen Waddle will be open all of a sudden. He'll find a way to get the ball to Cedric Wilson. He'll find Julian Hill in the middle of the field. He'll find all these different options. Tua does this on a regular basis, with or without Tyreek Hill. And this now I'm going to give you guys the biggest way of saying this is where the proof is in the pudding, that it's not just anybody who can find success with Tyreek Hill. Micah Parsons has a big mouth. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Micah Parsons has a big mouth, and he often says things that gets him into hot water. This might be another one of those things where we're going to look at him and say, I don't know about that one, Chief. So here, let me break this down for you really quickly here, just as a little reminder for everybody. When Tyreek Hill was on the football field, he was on the football field not just for Tua. He was on the football field for Teddy Bridgewater. He was on the football field for Skylar Thompson. And what did the Dolphins accomplish when Tua was not playing? Oh, yeah, a whole lot of nothing. Let me go ahead and give you guys the record for the Miami Dolphins in games where Tua did not play last season. The first game that Tua was never involved, and this was because I don't count the Bengals game. The Bengals game, he got taken out in halfway. The first game that Tua did not play was against the New York Jets at MetLife Stadium. It was the MetLife takeover. Unfortunately, it was not much of a takeover because the Jets put up 40 on Miami that game. And as a little reminder for everybody, Teddy Bridgewater got taken out in the first play, after the first play of the game, a fake wobble or whatever. I don't know how much of a difference it would have made, to be perfectly honest, because Teddy Bridgewater is not Tua. Skylar Thompson had to come in off the bench. And we remember the scene of just basically Mike McDaniel just ripping out cards from his wristband because he couldn't handle it yet. Skylar Thompson went 19 of 33 for 166 yards, an interception, 2 sacks, no touchdowns whatsoever. And again, Tyreek Hill was playing in that game. He played the game. 2 attempts for rushing for 13 yards and 7 catches for 47 yards. Tyreek was the leading receiver for the Dolphins in that game. Why was Tyreek not enough to give Skylar Thompson the opening he needed to be able to do whatever he wanted? Jalen Waddle was in that game. Cedric Wilson was in that game. Trent Sherfield was in that game. River Craycraft was in that game. All the Dolphins' important players, aside from Raheem Mostert, was in that game. So why wasn't it enough? Why couldn't Tyreek just magically elevate Skylar Thompson to the levels of being at least a competent NFL starter? Because it's not that easy. So let's go ahead. Let's keep going down the list here. I think everybody knows this mostly at this point, that they understand what I'm saying here when I say this. How about the Minnesota Vikings game? Miami was in that game. It was closer. Miami lost that game as well. So now they're 0-2 without Tua at this point in 2022. Miami lost 24-16, and we'll look at the stats real quick. So Skylar Thompson started off pretty strong. So he went 7 of 13 for 89 yards. Not great, I'll grant you. And after that, he ended up getting hurt, and Teddy Bridgewater had to come in and face his old football team. So what did Teddy Bridgewater do? Admittedly, he had himself a pretty good game. 23 of 34 for 329 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions as well. That was a problem. And what were Tyreek's stats in that game? 12 catches for 177 yards. Jalen Waddle, that's 6 catches for 129 yards. And I grant you this. That game was a good game overall offensively for Miami in the sense of their numbers. But where did it count? They still lost that game. They only scored 16 points. What happened there? Oh, and by the way, 13 of those 16 points came in the fourth quarter. So it was basically 2-minute offense, hurry up, we got to get this game going kind of offense. It took them that long to be able to get things going finally. And that was with Teddy Bridgewater, who was the main backup, not Skylar. And so, again, Tyreek Hill helped a lot. He helped a lot in that game. But he couldn't get them to the point where they actually could win that game. There was no room for winning in that game because Teddy Bridgewater is not as good as Tua Tagovailoa. He just isn't. You can't just pretend that that any quarterback, as long as they have Tyreek Hill and the offense that Mike McDaniel has set up, all those weapons are pretty much still there now. Jalen Waddle's still there. Cedric Wilson is still there. The only real difference is that you traded Trent Sherfield for Braxton Berrios. Nothing else has changed. So let's keep going. Finally against Pittsburgh, Tua comes back. And the Miami Dolphins, and granted, again, it was a close one. It wasn't his best game. But the Dolphins won that game 16-10. Credit to, again, to Noah Igbenogany. This is one real highlight of his career so far that I can remember, at least as a Dolphin. I think he had at least one highlight so far as a Cowboy, so kudos to him on that. So beat the Pittsburgh Steelers 16-10. Then against the Detroit Lions, Tua has one of the best games of his career. 31 for 20, beat the Lions 31-27, and the stats for Tua, phenomenal. 29-36, 382 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Tyreek had himself a fantastic game as well. 12 catches for 188 yards. The touchdowns came in the form of Jalen Waddle, who caught 8 catches for 106 yards. So, again, the Dolphins won that game. They put up 30 points at least on the Lions. And all of a sudden, you see the offense start to take off because now it's not just Tyreek. It's not just Tua. You have both of them at the same time. Against the Chicago Bears, this was another close one. Miami wins 35-32. Tua Tagovailoa, 21 of 30 for 302 yards, 3 touchdowns. What is Tyreek doing in that game? 7 catches, 143 yards, and a touchdown. Waddle himself had 5 catches for 85 yards and a touchdown. So again, you have them both. Things tend to go pretty well for Miami. Another win coming right up. Dolphins win 39-17 against the Cleveland Browns. So Tua goes 25 of 32 for 285 yards, 3 touchdowns. And what did Tyreek do? Well, as it turns out, Tyreek Hill actually had one of his worst games that year. Tyreek only had 5 catches for 44 yards. But that's a bad game for him. But even then, it wasn't a bad game. Because look at the rest of the stats. We're talking about receiving here, right? Cedric Wilson, 1 catch for 7 yards. Jeff Wilson, 2 catches for 24 yards. Raheem Mostert, 4 catches for 22 yards. Jalen Waddle, 4 catches for 66 yards. Trent Sherfield, 4 catches for 63 yards. Alec Ingold, 4 catches for 45 yards. And then finally Mike Gesicki for 2 catches and 31 yards. Tyreek was part of it, but Tua threw the ball all over the place. And they scored 35 points in that game. That counts for something here, folks. That's a Tua thing. The Dolphins scored 5 touchdowns on offense, three passing touchdowns, and then one rushing touchdown for Jeff Wilson and 1 for Raheem Mostert. You can see what's happening here. I don't have to give you guys the box score for every single game. You can tell the difference. And then as soon as the Dolphins lost Tua, this was against the Green Bay Packers when he went out the next time. That was on Christmas Day. The Dolphins lost that game 20-26. Not a great look. And I grant you, they had a losing streak, even with Tua in there. Against the 49ers, they got their butts kicked. Against the Chargers, they got their butts kicked. Buffalo, that one's a little closer. That was in Buffalo. Green Bay, Tua went down, and after that, it was basically all downhill. The only game that the Dolphins won without Tua was against the New York Jets in Miami, and I was sitting in a Chili's with my friend and my little brother watching that game, and I was probably the most stressed out, miserable person at the entire bar because what I was watching was both the most boring and the most stressful game that I have ever watched in my entire life. Dolphins somehow won that game 11-6. Neither team could do anything, and it was just a question of who was going to screw it up first. Luckily, it was the Jets. So to say that with Tyreek Hill on the field, Tua is amazing, and without him, he's nothing, it's just statistically and just watching it with your eyes. If you actually watch the game, you can tell that narrative is false. It's just lazy. And everybody wants to crown Tyreek the MVP, in spite of the fact, this is the best part of all, Tyreek himself has to come out and say to all these pundits, there was this one throw against the Commanders where everybody was saying, look at Tyreek Hill adjust because this was a bad throw from Tua. He should have thrown it to this other side, and instead it should have gone the other way. Tyreek literally came out and said, no, I ran the wrong way, and I was the one who messed it up. Tua even told me afterwards and showed me the proof that I was the one who messed up. Do you think Tyreek is just going to lie for the sake of his quarterback? He would have nothing to gain from that other than to say that he's a good teammate. Everybody knows he's a good teammate. He has nothing to gain by that other than just to say that, hey, you guys are wrong. Tyreek is the one calling for Tua to be MVP. Tyreek is the one calling out everybody for saying, you wrong about Tua. Stop. There's a reason he comes out and says, stop misjudging him. Stop underestimating him. Stop acting like he's nobody. Yes, he used to play with Patrick Mahomes. As a quarterback, nobody in the NFL is better than Patrick Mahomes. He is a freak of nature. Sometimes it feels like he's not even human. But that does not discount what it is that Tua Tagovailoa brings to the Miami Dolphins football team. And if you remove Tua from the equation, so far we haven't had to see it this year because, thank goodness, the jiu-jitsu training and whatever else he's done this offseason, maybe the new helmet, he's managed to keep himself healthy. He has not had to lose. He has not had to leave the game. The only time he's ever had to leave the game is if it's garbage time and they just don't want him to get hurt anyway. It doesn't matter. The game is already won. Why throw Tua in there if you don't need to? That's the only time he's had to leave a game. And knock on wood, it'll stay that way the rest of the season, I hope. But whenever Mike White comes into the game, you can tell that there's a difference in how the team plays. It's not the same. Not just any quarterback can do this. Tua is throwing with anticipation, which somehow is a bad thing all of a sudden. I don't know how, because we've witnessed 7 to 8 years of Ryan Tannehill throwing to people instead of spots, and we were hating the fact that he would throw to people instead of spots because it would mean that if the guy isn't there, the catch isn't being made. That's not how we didn't want a quarterback like that. So now we got a guy who does the opposite, and somehow that's bad again. I don't know how. So not anybody can do what Tua is doing. Tua watches and throws people off with his eyes. Tua knows how to read a defense and literally looks at Tyreek and says, hey, go run an out route because this dude is not going to be paying attention. And they score touchdowns that way. Tua calls audibles to Tyreek and says, hey, your guy is going to be one-on-one. I'm going to throw it to you. We're about to score. And Tyreek says, okay, sure. And every time it's worked. That is not something that just any quarterback can do. Tua is special. He deserves the MVP. And I'm not trying to say that Tyreek doesn't, because if I were Tyreek Hill, I would also think that I deserve the MVP. But since it's a quarterback award most of the time, and let's be real about this, a quarterback is going to get this award no matter what. Somebody out there is going to get it. It's going to be a quarterback. It might be Jalen Hurts. It might be Brock Purdy. They might give it to Patrick Mahomes again just because he's Patrick Mahomes. I don't know. But to say that Tua doesn't deserve it, of all the quarterbacks, he's somehow the only one who doesn't get to deserve it. They're putting Dak Prescott, who only recently started playing well, into the MVP conversation. Why? It's just because he's a cowboy? That just doesn't do it for me. Jalen Hurts is more deserving than Dak Prescott. I'll even say Brock Purdy is more deserving than Dak Prescott. I don't want to hear about that. Tua deserves the MVP award. Does he deserve it more than Tyreek? Personally, me, I think so, because if you had to pick me one player who is so indispensable that the offense stops working without them, I already read you guys the numbers earlier in the show. When Tyreek Hill is not on the field, Tua keeps chugging along. When Tua is not on the football field and Tyreek is, offense still almost comes to a standstill. That quarterback is more special than anybody's willing to give him credit. And if there's anybody on this team who deserves the MVP award, it is the Miami Dolphins quarterback. And hopefully, Tua will manage to do something. I don't know what it's going to take. But he will do something that will finally give people a reason to see, okay, Tua is the reason why the Dolphins offense is so special. That's going to be it for this show. Thank you all so much for listening. Once again, if you have not already done so, make sure you go to prizepicks.com. Use that promo code 5, that's FIVE, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit when you sign up. And make sure you go and click on the links in the description below to go to My Nintendo Store. Make your orders. Christmas is almost here, so make sure you're getting those bonus items along with your order for those games. Go ahead. It's the best deal you could possibly get. We will see you all Friday for another episode of Fins Nation.